Hello everyone. Today we will be seeing the subject biology, and the unit that we will be studying today is cell and its environment. So in this unit we will see what are cells and how the cells are affected by their environment. And there are three subparts that we will be studying in this video. First is what are the modes of transport. We will see what are the modes of transport and by which modes of transport the cell transports all the substances and molecules. Second is we will see what is diffusion and what are the processes involved in the diffusion. And third is what is facilitated diffusion and how this facilitated diffusion is separated from the diffusion. Okay? Excited? Let's go. Okay, so as the unit name suggests, it is cells and its environment. So before moving further, we must know what are cells. So we can see that all living organisms are made up of cells. Now we know that cells are the building blocks of any living organism. Now when I say living organism, which organisms am I talking about? So I am talking about all the microorganisms, all the plants, animals and humans. Now microbes includes fungi, all types of fungi, all types of algae, all types of viruses and all types of bacteria, and many different types of organisms are there. But basically we study these microorganisms. So when we study all these microorganisms or plants or animals or humans, we find that they are made up of cells. Now cells are very tiny structures. Tiny means they are very small structures and they can only be seen under microscope. Now microscope is an instrument. To understand this thing in a better way, I may ask you a question to look at your finger and tell me that how many cells are present on your finger. Can you do that? No. Why? Because we cannot see the cells which are present on our finger. The reason being that cells are very small or tiny structures. So to see them, to visualize them, we need to have a particular instrument that is called microscope. Now, when we study these cells, we basically see two types of cells. Which two types of cells are there? So, they are plant cells and animal cells. Now, plant cells are seen in all the plants. If they are very big plants, then also they have plant cells, and even if they are very small shrubs or herbs, they also have the plant cells. And animal cells are seen in all the animals and humans. Okay, so with this, I guess we are clear with what are cells. Now let's see that why transport is required and what is transport. So in simple language, transport is in and out of the substances from something. So we know that each cell requires either food or nutrition to obtain energy and do many life sustaining processes. Now, when I say that I want to run, if I say I want to go out, I want to use my mobile phone, anything. So for all these things, I require energy, and this energy comes from the food that we eat, and the food gets processed at the cellular level. So my each cell will perform many different life sustaining processes that are nutrition, it can be respiration and excretion. So all these processes, that is nutrition, respiration and excretion, they require water. We usually see that while eating anything, we will make sure that in our whole day, we will consume enough amount of liquids, right? So from that liquid, the water comes or goes to the cell. So all these processes requires water and they are chemical reactions. This chemical reactions also includes some gases and other substances. It includes gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen and some other materials like some salts, some sugars and some acids. Now, when all these processes are occurring, it is very common thing that there will be production of some amount of waste materials, right? So we can say that after each process, some waste is generated and it's essential to remove it out of the cell. Now waste can be in the form of carbon dioxide, in the form of this salt, this sugar, or some acids. Now if these things accumulate inside our cell, they will definitely poison the cell, or they can be toxic to our cell, and it can lead to the cell death. So it becomes very essential to transport these substances. Now, all these processes are occurring inside the cell. If this is my cell, all these processes are taking place inside the cell. Now, this salt, acid, or carbon dioxide is generated here. So I have to remove it out of the cell. So I will remove it with the help of the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the outermost environment which is present in the cell. So by the help of this cell membrane, the substances will go out or either come inside the cell. Now let's see what is concentration. So concentration can be defined as measure of the amount of subcomponent in a solution. So whenever we talk about solution, we see two things. Which two? They are solute and solvent. So if I want to understand the example of concentration in a better way, I can take the example of salt and water. How can I understand? So in this beaker, I have taken the solvent. Solvent is something in which we dissolve something, and solute is something that is dissolved in the solvent. Now in my water, let's take an example that I have 100 ml water, plus I add 5 grams of salt. So if I ask that how much amount of salt is there in my water, so I will say that 5 gram of salt per 100 ml of water. So this is my concentration. With concentration, there are two other terms which we should know, that is dilute and concentration. So in dilute solutions, what happens is that in dilute solutions, the amount of solute is less, and in concentrated solution, the amount of solute is very high. Okay. Then we can see something about concentration gradient. So what is concentration gradient? If I want to define it, I can say that the concentration gradient occurs when the concentration of particles is higher in one area than another. Let's take an example of one image. Okay, here you can see that there is a high concentration of particles in this area, and in this area there are no particles at 0 second or at the given time, right? So this creates a concentration gradient that molecules from this area will pass through this, this and this. And after some time, due to the formation of this concentration gradient, my whole beaker will have equal distribution of all these particles. So this equal distribution occurred due to the concentration gradient. So I hope you understood what is concentration gradient. Okay. Now let's see what are the types of transportation. So we saw that transportation is required for cell to get rid of waste materials and to obtain the required materials. Now, when I say that I want to eat something, I want to go to school, I want to play with my mobile phone, anything. So for anything, I demand or I require energy. So on the basis of energy, there are two types of transportation. Which two types of transportation? First is active transport. Active means energetic, right? So when I say active, that means this transport demands energy. And the second type of transport is passive transport. So there is no need of energy. And here in active transport, the energy required is get used in the form of ATP. Okay. Now let's see what is passive transport in this video. So for passive transport, there are three ways. Which three ways? First is simple diffusion. Second is facilitated diffusion, and third is osmosis. So in this video we will see these two, simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion. Diffusion means the molecules will pass the cell membrane without any energy. So no ATP is required here. Now let's see what is diffusion. So if I want to define diffusion, I can say that diffusion is net passive movement of particles. These particles can be atoms, they can be ions or molecules from a region of high concentration to low concentration. And this movement continues till the concentration of substance is uniform throughout. We just saw these things in the previous slide where we saw something about concentration gradient, right? So then what happened? The molecules or the particles from their higher concentration, here they were in higher concentration, and in this beaker they were equally distributed. So the molecules will pass from their higher concentration to their lower concentration. It continues till the concentration of substance is uniform throughout. And the required energy, like any process won't occur without energy, right? So this will also require some amount of energy. So the required energy will come from the kinetic energy of the random movement of molecules and atoms. So if I say this is my beaker and these are the molecules that are present here, so all these molecules, if we zoom in, all these molecules will be continuously moving and they will continuously be in contact with each other. So due to this random movement, some kinetic energy is generated, and this kinetic energy is used by these molecules and atoms for the process of diffusion. This is the best example of diffusion where we can see that initially we just added some drops of some colored compound, and initially there was the concentration of colored compound here only, here there was nothing. After some time it diffused from its higher concentration to its lower concentrations, the molecules traveled, and after some more time there is a concentration of colored compound at the bottom also. So we can say that molecules traveled from their higher concentration to lower concentration. Now, where we can see the diffusion in the cell. So we can say that small molecules, mind this word, that is small molecules. Only diffusion will occur with small molecules and not with the large molecules, because large molecules are so big that they cannot diffuse, right? If I see, or if I say that I am seeing from any tiny thing, so I can see, but I cannot go through inside it. Why? Because that particular thing or that particular hole is very small. So we can say that only small molecules will be able to diffuse inside the cell. Now, which small molecules in the cell shows this kind of diffusion? So that is water, carbon dioxide and oxygen. They can easily pass through the cell membrane. So for water, that is H2O, carbon dioxide, that is CO2, and O2, there occurs the process of diffusion. Now, if we take an example, so when a cell uses oxygen for aerobic respiration, now aerobic respiration is a respiration where oxygen is required. We humans respire aerobically. We need oxygen for our respiration process. So when the cell uses oxygen for the aerobic respiration, the oxygen fuses inside the cell. That means if this is my cell and this is oxygen, then it will diffuse inside my cell. And after the process of respiration, carbon dioxide or CO2 is produced. Now this carbon dioxide is waste product. We see it earlier. So this carbon dioxide will again move out. It will go out of the cell by the process of diffusion. Now where we can see the diffusion in cells? So this is the example that initially the molecules were higher in outside and their concentration was very low inside. So after some time they moved inside and it happened till the equilibrium was achieved, or till the amount of solutes was equal in the both environments. So this is how diffusion can be seen. Now, what are the factors that affect the diffusion? So, there are several factors that affect the rate of diffusion. Which are they? So, they are surface area and temperature first. Let's talk about that. The higher the surface area, the higher will be the rate of diffusion because the concentration gradient will be higher. So, molecules will move faster. Now, if we talk about temperature, the higher will be the temperature, the higher will be the rate of diffusion. Next are concentration of gradients and distance. So, we just discussed that as the concentration of gradients will be higher, the speed will be higher and the rate of diffusion will be also higher. And when we talk about distance, so when the distance is large, the diffusion rate decreases. So if my distance is short, then my diffusion rate will be higher, and if my distance is high, then my diffusion rate will be slower. Now let's see the examples of diffusion. Their examples can be gas exchange in the alveoli of humans. Alveoli are present in the lungs, which are responsible for the transfer of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the blood capillaries. Then gas exchange for the photosynthesis that occurs in the plants. Next is gas exchange for the respiration that we just saw here. And transfer of transmitter substances. So transmitter substances are present in our brain, which are responsible for the transfer of some neurochemicals or some neuron signals. So these are the examples of diffusion, or at these events we can see diffusion occurring inside our body. And last is osmosis. Now let's see what is facilitated diffusion. So in facilitated diffusion, what happens that there is the movement of specific molecules down the concentration gradient passing through the membrane via specific carrier proteins. So here specific carrier proteins are there. Carrier means they will carry something, and specific molecules, here one thing is important, that only specific molecules are transported. Now each carrier molecule will allow only specific molecule to pass through and not all the molecules. And these molecules are selected by these criteria: their size, shape and charge. So depending on size, shape and charge, each molecule will have its particular or specific carrier molecule. Now let's see exactly what is it. So when we say that it is passive transport, so there will be no ATP required. Then this type of diffusion occurs for which substances? So it occurs for glucose and for amino acids. So this can also be asked in exam, that for which substances the process of facilitated diffusion occurs. And if we see in this figure, so we can understand how the process occurs. So these are the carrier proteins. So with these proteins, the molecule will bind with these carrier proteins and they will transport the substances inside the cell. And the same thing can happen from inside to outside. The molecules will bind from inside and they will be released outside. So this is how the facilitated diffusion takes place. Now, if we see what are the questions which can be asked or which have already been asked in the previous years, so we can see that explain diffusion, explain facilitated diffusion, what is diffusion, by which process gas exchange occurs during respiration, and how or by which method glucose and amino acids can be transported. So if we are asked about diffusion, we will say that diffusion is a process of movement of molecules from its higher concentration to lower concentration. Now facilitated diffusion, here we will show the role of carrier proteins and we will write the definition of diffusion. Diffusion is the same Now, by which process gas exchange occurs during the respiration? So we can say it occurs by the process of diffusion. And by which method glucose and amino acids can be transported? So they can be transported by the method of facilitated diffusion. So these are the answers for the questions that have already been asked in the previous year. And next question is, what is carrier protein? So carrier proteins are those proteins which carry the substances and which are used in the facilitated diffusion. Okay, so I hope you are clear with this thing. Okay, so with this we conclude this topics. Thank you so much. I hope you understood it in a better way. And for more videos like this, you can visit wasserX.com. Till we meet again, take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.